All eyes are on the quarterbacks for Tennessee and Vanderbilt, but the key for the Volunteers to win this football game is running the ball with DeSean Bishop. Vanderbilt's rush defense, very misleading. I'll tell you why.
You are Locked On Vols, your daily podcast on the Tennessee Volunteers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, everybody? Welcome into it, your Wednesday morning Locked On Vols. I am your host, Eric Cain, a member of the VolQuest.com team here in Knoxville, covering your Tennessee Volunteers. We are a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every single day. We are the number one sports podcasting network available. That is the Locked On Podcast Network. This is Locked On Vols, your daily stop for Tennessee football news and entertainment. Appreciate you everydayers for being a part of the show and making it your first listen, your first watch each and every single day. And we're going to have a fun show coming up here today. We're going to throw it way back on a Wednesday. Let's see what I did there. No Throwback Thursday, because I'm going to have a crossover with Corey Burton of Locked On Vanderbilt coming up on tomorrow's show. So looking forward to that. Throwback or way back Wednesday with Noah Taylor, NPC, coming up later in the show. 1951, the first undisputed, unanimous national championship in Tennessee program history, but it almost didn't happen that way because a 1-10 Vanderbilt club tried to play spoiler. We'll go back and revisit that account. Ward Wednesday coming up in segment number 2, getting Josh Ward's thoughts on Tennessee football against Diego Pavia and the Vanderbilt Commodores. But first, the key to Tennessee winning this football game is running the football, while all eyes are going to be on the quarterbacks in Joey Aguilar and Diego Pavia. We had a show about that yesterday, about looking at the numbers and looking at the deep ball accuracy specifically for these two quarterbacks and how they had very similar journeys coming through the junior college ranks and now finding success at the Power 4, specifically in the SEC. And it was a good show, and there was a lot of good facts in that. But here's some more. Tennessee's way to win this football game is by running the football. Tennessee has ran it all over Vanderbilt in this program history. In 4 meetings, or under Josh Heupel, in 4 meetings, Tennessee has thrived on the ground against Vanderbilt. 280 yards combined, or 280 yards in 3 of those matchups. 1,906 yards, 1,096 yards against Vanderbilt in 4 seasons. Tennessee last year ran for, what was it? A little over 200 yards. I think I've got this written somewhere. It's been very successful against Vanderbilt, is what I'm trying to say. You look at Vanderbilt, and Vanderbilt is 5th in the league in rush defense, giving up 105 yards a game, and that's a really good number. It's a really good number, not trying to take anything away from that number. They give up 3.68 yards per attempt, however. That's 7th in the league, so a little better than half, or a little better than midway point in the league, so top half, and that's a good number. But Tennessee's is actually better in terms of yards given up per carry. You look at what Vanderbilt has done and look at the schedule, and you look at the teams that they played and the teams that have ran the football with success against Vanderbilt. Auburn has rushed the football for over 200 yards. Missouri has rushed the football for 170 yards against Vanderbilt. You look at the rest of that schedule, and these teams aren't very good running the football. You take out the cupcakes, Virginia Tech, which is actually a top 30 rush offense in the country, or top 50 rush offense in the country. They only had 114. That was all the way back in week 2. South Carolina can't run the football at all. Only had 86 yards. Georgia State doesn't count. Utah State's 119 yards. Alabama, they can't run the football very well this year, at least consistently. Only 146 yards. LSU, which can't run the football at all, only 100 yards. Texas, which can't run the football at all. That's still one of the biggest surprises in all the SEC this year. The fact that Texas can't run the football, had only 100 yards against Vanderbilt. And Kentucky, which has not got one of the better rushing attacks in the SEC, only 31 yards. But, of course, Kentucky was playing from behind the entire game and certainly throwing the football a little bit more. So if you look at it on a game-by-game breakdown, we're poking holes in this argument, right? Auburn, again, which has got a good run game, 210 yards. Missouri, which has got the best run game in all of the SEC, 170 yards. So I think there's opportunity for Tennessee to get in there and get after the ground game. Certainly because I think that Vanderbilt's stat of 105 yards a contest is just a bit misleading. The other Power 4 opponents, for the most part, didn't really try to run the football all that much against the Commodores. 21 attempts for LSU, 25 attempts for Utah State. Alabama, 38 attempts, and of course it just didn't have, that's kind of an outlier, just didn't have much success on the ground in that regard. Also, I think the key for Tennessee is running the football, creating balance in this football game. Tennessee this season is 1-3, 1 win, 3 losses, when Joey Aguilar has attempted 35 passes or more in a ball game. During his tenure as head coach while at Tennessee, Josh Heupel is 3-7 when his starting quarterbacks have thrown it 35 plus times. You've got the 1-3 mark for Joey Aguilar this year. Joe Milton did it one time. Hendon Hooker did it twice, I believe. So, or attempted those passes 35 or more 35 or more attempts in a game. So it hadn't been done an awful lot outside of Joey Aguilar, but the record shows that when you're throwing it at least 35 times in a football game, you're not as balanced as you need to be, and you're not winning as many games as you should be. You also look at what Tennessee did this last time out against Florida. Entering the contest in SEC play this year, Tennessee had rushed for over 150 yards just one time, and that was against Arkansas. Just one time in 6 SEC games, Tennessee had rushed it for over 150 yards. Last week against Florida, and again, Florida's not winning any awards this year, Tennessee had 177 yards in the first half, finished the game with 248 yards, which is really impressive. 248 yards on 51 carries. Tennessee had 31 first-half carries against the Gators. DeSean Bishop, of course, RB1 for Tennessee, had 24 carries, 116 yards. It was his third 100-yard performance of the season. On the year, he's got 886 yards on 143 carries. That's 6.2 yards per carry. Again, we've been talking all year long how they just don't let Bishop ride. They don't let him. They have too much of a rotation. And if you look at the stats, man, his yards per carry are very, very good. And it's completely different than last year when Tennessee just rode Dylan Sampson until the wheels fell off almost in his record-breaking season. 13 games last year, Sampson had 258 carries. He averaged 19.8 carries per game. Bishop is only averaging 13 carries per game. And actually, if you go back to the 2024 stat sheet and you look at yards per carry, Bishop, again, the sample size was so minute compared to where Dylan Sampson was. His yard per carry was actually better than that as well. So again, I think key in this football game, when all eyes are on the quarterback, is to run the football with DeSean Bishop. Run the football, be patient, don't throw it 35 or more times. And just because the Commodores had the 5th best rush defense in the league at 105 yards per game, the stat is a bit misleading. Look at the up and down the schedules. Not a lot of teams that can run the football with authority this season. Kentucky, no. Texas, no. LSU, no. Alabama, no. South Carolina, no. And the teams that run the football pretty well have had success against the Commodores. Auburn, 200 yards. Missouri, 170 yards. What will Tennessee look like in this football game? We will see. Overall, again, a quick glance at the Vanderbilt offense. They are second behind Tennessee in points per game at 38.9. They're 5th in total offense at 458 yards per game. 4th in passing offense at 283 yards per game. 8th in rushing offense, 174 yards per game. They've converted 52% of third downs. They've scored touchdowns 77% of the time in the red zone. The offense has turned the football over 10 times. They've allowed 18 sacks on the season. We talked a lot about Diego Pavia yesterday, so we won't kind of get into his stats a little bit. We'll shift over to that defense real quick. Again, kind of been hit or miss. They've allowed 30 or more points on 4 occasions this year. Utah State did it, Alabama did it, Texas did it, and Auburn. It's allowed just 7 points in a win over South Carolina, 10 to Missouri, and 17 to a rejuvenated Kentucky offense that has found some success here at the end of the season. The Commodores rank, I think it was 12th or 13th in the conference in scoring defense at 21.7. Total defense, 353.4 yards. I've got that right here. I just missed. Be patient, excuse me. Scoring offense. Vanderbilt ranks 16, 15, 14, 13, 12, 11th in the conference at 21.7, and they ranked 11th in the conference in total yards per game at 353 yards per game. We mentioned the rush defense, 105 yards given up on the ground. That's 5th in the conference. They've got pass defense is 15th at 248 yards. Tennessee's actually better in that regard. They're allowing opponents to convert third downs at 40% of the time, 56% red zone touchdown rate, which is a really good number. That's better than Tennessee's number. I think red zone is going to be a big factor in this football game as well. They force 14 turnovers. They have 25 sacks, 67 TFLs. Vanderbilt allowed 210 rushing yards to Auburn 2 weeks ago, 170 to Missouri, but yielded a season-low 31 yards on the ground to Kentucky last week. Again, that's just a quick glance at some of the numbers, but I think the key in this football game, when all eyes are on the quarterbacks, and deservingly so, and Joey Aguilar and Diego Pavia, running the football with authority, doing what Tennessee has done against Vanderbilt under Josh Heupel. Again, they ran for over 280 yards in 3 of the matchups. In 4 matchups, they ran for over 280 yards in 3 of them. In 4 matchups, Tennessee's ran for 1,096 yards against Vanderbilt. Run the football with DeSean Bishop and secure a win on Saturday, on Senior Day, the final game of the regular season and the final game at Neyland Stadium this year. Run the football. That's key number 1 to victory. We'll talk about it more on Friday's show when we get into our keys to victory for Tennessee and Vanderbilt. Couple of guests. I'm going to step out of the way. I've done a lot of talking here in segment number 1, so I'm going to step aside. Couple of guests. We'll first meet with Josh Ward, get his thoughts on Tennessee and Vanderbilt, what he thinks are the keys to victory for the Volunteers over the Commodores. That is coming up next as we continue on here at your Wednesday Locked On Vols. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on all the action than over at FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you miss the start of a game or you want to ride that hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who's going to score next to those fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game more exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. So we're talking NBA here. College basketball is happening right now. Tennessee's in Las Vegas this week. You got futures over for the SEC totals, for the SEC wins, for the SEC championship, for NCAA, March Madness, Final Four, all that and more. Plus, college football playoffs about to start. Get in and pick your team today over at FanDuel Sportsbook. And if you're new to FanDuel, listen up. New customers, $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So, head on over to FanDuel today and sign up and play your game. That's with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA, and it's where you can make every moment more. Josh Ward for his weekly hit here on Locked On Vols. We call it Ward Wednesday. Josh, pretty good game for Tennessee down in the swamp. 31-0 at the half. Tennessee scored 4 straight touchdowns to begin the game, scored on 5 of its first 6 possessions, really just coasted in the second half again with a 31-0 lead. That was quite the exclamation point to, we're going to end this streak. We're the better football team. You're not. And we're going to show it.
Yeah, I don't know how you could be anything but just ecstatic with how Tennessee performed down there in the swamp. As Tennessee's had issues at different times this season, did not in Gainesville in that first half. And the game was over at halftime. Florida knew it. Tennessee knew it. Anybody paying attention knew it. And Florida figured it out actually pretty early. When it was 21-0 and the yardage difference, I think, was 202-1. Florida knew we're not coming back to win this game. And Josh Heupel figured out, I've beaten this team. They're done. So he was able to set it on cruise control in the second half and get back to Knoxville for an important week, because Josh Heupel also knows that's just one game, and they were able to turn their attention in the middle of that game to finishing it out to get ready for the final regular season week. But the defense stepped up and got stops early. The offense was able to do everything it wanted to early on in that game, and a ton of credit to the offensive line, to the running backs led by DeSean Bishop, who was a workhorse out there. And Tennessee was able to snap a long streak in the drought in Gainesville and satisfy something that fans have been waiting on a long time.
Yeah, again, it feels like I talk about this with somebody every week. There's a lot of good stories on this football team, but man, my favorite story is DeSean Bishop. You and I talked about it last week, actually. I mean, again, he just continues to defy the odds, continues to excel. And, he came early on in his career. It's like, oh, yeah, the Cardinals running back, walk on. Yeah, it's a good story. Good that he's getting to stay home and, represent the Power T. And then it's like, oh, this guy's had a really good spring. He gets hurt. It's like, okay, well, he might transfer. Nope, comes back, really good spring, really good fall camp playing. And now he's like leading this backfield this year. And it's like, not only is he leading the backfield, but he's, putting up some really good numbers. And he's one of the better running backs in the Southeastern Conference. And again, I just thought he took over that football game, and give credit to Tennessee and the play calling for letting him go. I mean, he had 19 first half carries. About time, right? And he was good, and his yards per carry is good, and he had his third 100-yard performance of the season. DeSean Bishop just continues to be a fantastic story for Tennessee football.
Yeah, DeSean Bishop is not just a story of, well, he's a good player for a local guy who was a walk-on. He is a good SEC football player. Remember his long touchdown run against Alabama. He did everything Tennessee needed him to do down there in the swamp, and he's been one of the most productive players at his position in the conference this season. DeSean arrived at Tennessee as a walk-on from Carnes High School, but when he arrived and he showed up and started working and preparing to potentially help his first year, dealt with an injury, so he was not able to do that. But I think older players were surprised to find out he was a walk-on player because they were so impressed and realized he belongs in the SEC that there was no reason to think this guy came in without a scholarship. He had to earn his way, and he's done that. So he's a great story. He is an example of what we love about college football, and he's turned into a really good player. He's going to continue to be that. So all credit to DeSean Bishop. And we also know, we've talked about it since Josh Heupel arrived, the running game is so important for Tennessee's offense to be successful. It was there against Florida. It'll be important this week against Vanderbilt too.
Yep, over 2,000 yards on the season. That's happened all 5 years under Josh Heupel. Tennessee, I do not believe, is going to get to the 2,500 threshold. So technically, this will be the worst rushing offense he's had. But again, your run for 2,000 yards, that's pretty good for most teams. You look at this week, you mentioned Vanderbilt, and this is a team that is really good offensively, just a really complete offense. Defensively, they defend the run pretty well. They're very up and down, I feel like, and I think very gettable defensively. But again, offensively, the story led by quarterback Diego Pavia, who Tennessee fans want Joey Aguilar to stick around another year and win this court case. And it's kind of funny if he does, it will be because of Diego Pavia and his lawyer team, which I think is just kind of funny. But a guy that doesn't like Tennessee has made that known over the offseason, but going to be coming into a Hornets test on Saturday with so much on the line for especially the Commodores.
Yeah, there's as much juice for this Vanderbilt game as I can really remember. James Franklin had some teams that were up, but Tennessee football was not at a very high level when he was the head coach. Tennessee football is at a high level. Vanderbilt is trying to get into the college football playoff. They know they need to win to have a shot there. And then you throw in the Diego Pavia storyline. Vanderbilt is a good team for more reasons than just Pavia. But he is obviously what drives a lot of the belief that is developed over the last couple of seasons, the playmaking out there on the field. He's just so important for them. Tennessee knows that as well. So I'm sure that Tennessee's defenders will be highly motivated. They're well aware of the comments that he made in the summer about Vanderbilt running the state of Tennessee. To Pavia's credit, he's backed everything up for the most part to this point in terms of how he would play, his team being really good. They're not really going to win the national championship, but they have a chance to be a playoff team where they are considered one of the contenders to do that. I laughed at the idea of that in the summer. They've gone out and at least put themselves in a position to get into the playoff. Tennessee is in a position to keep them out, and if Tennessee wins, you match records, you're 2-0 against Pavia, you can say to Vanderbilt, yeah, you guys have improved. You're still not at our level. So that opportunity is there for Tennessee this week. They've got good players at different positions. Stowers at tight end. Their corners have played well. They've done some really good things this season as a team, and Tennessee has to take this team seriously. The Pavia storyline, though, will drive a lot of the conversation heading into Saturday.
Yep, as it should. And again, everybody saw the Netflix documentary and what he had to say about Tennessee. And again, like college football needs players. Like as a college football guy, I understand he's kind of unlikable, but like you need that in college football, especially at a place like Vanderbilt. I mean, that's gold, right? I do think a lot of people liked Diego Pavia last year until they saw the Netflix documentary. Like, oh, this guy's kind of, I don't know about that. But everybody needs a villain, and he's a really good football player. And he's legitimately a Heisman hopeful. I mean, like he is one of the best quarterbacks in the Southeastern Conference. His last run over, Auburn, Texas, and Kentucky the last 3 weeks, he's averaging 3.5 touchdowns per game. He's ran for a touchdown in 6 straight games. He's throwing for a ton of yards. He's playing out of his mind right now. You look at Tennessee and 10-2. You just kind of assumed always 10-2 from the SEC would get you in. And if you remember, Tennessee had to get a lot of help last year, and it got that help. There's a world where if Vanderbilt wins this game, Vanderbilt might still not make the playoff. What do you think about that? Vanderbilt at 10-2, if Vanderbilt wins this game, not making the playoff.
Yeah, it's a reminder of getting into a 12-team playoff still takes some work. And last year things were interesting late for Tennessee as a potential 10-2 team before the season, of course, wrapped up, because there were some other teams like Alabama and Ole Miss, the positions they were in, but they suffered third losses. So let's see how this weekend plays out. But Vanderbilt, if it's 10-2, that's a solid resume. You're 10-2 in the SEC. But I even think Vandy versus Texas is an interesting conversation. 10-2 versus 9-3 if Texas wins, because they'd have a win against Texas A&M. They would have beaten Vanderbilt head-to-head, and their non-conference loss to Ohio State is a loss that Vanderbilt would have suffered. But, part of it is the eye test still as well. And when I say that, you look at Vanderbilt, and I'm impressed by what they've done. Everybody is. But you still look at Vanderbilt and say, well, I don't know that they're as good as some of these other teams and that I would put them in. So some of the chaos that others, Tennessee, but Vanderbilt included, have hoped for the last few weeks have not really come together all the way. So Vanderbilt is not guaranteed a spot in, but they know if they're 10-2, they've got a claim to it. And that's why their focus this week is, hey, beat Tennessee. That's a big deal. But they actually have a bigger goal than they always do when it comes to the Tennessee game, and that's getting the college football playoff. They've got a real argument, and if they get some help elsewhere, they have a good chance to be in.
All right, Tennessee and Vanderbilt. Tennessee wins this game if it does what?
If Tennessee is sound, taking care of the football as it did this past week, eliminating mistakes that they've had issues with against Oklahoma and Georgia earlier in the season, the little things you have to do. If Tennessee takes care of the football against Oklahoma, I think there's a good chance we're talking about Tennessee trying to get a 10th win and trying to get into the college football playoff. So straight up, talent-wise, Tennessee has better players than Vanderbilt across the board. They'll have a home field advantage. If Tennessee is able to eliminate penalties, win the turnover battle, or stay even there, they were even this past weekend. That wasn't a factor in the Florida game. Tennessee was the better team straight up. It should be against Vanderbilt as well.
Josh, what's coming up the rest of the week on 99.1 The Sports Animal? Josh and Swain, noon to 3.
Yeah, huge week with this game, what it can mean for Tennessee moving forward. We're talking more Tennessee basketball with the Volunteers out in Vegas. So they will have played the Houston game by the time we have this conversation that you're listening to. But the sleigh ride was on Tuesday. It's back. So every Tuesday in the 1 o'clock hour, a full hour with VFL and SEC legend Ron Slay. So football and more hoops, Monday through Friday, 12 to 3 on Josh and Swain.
College football is back for one more week in the regular season, and it's going to be a good one. Rivalry week, right? Say that 10 times fast. Rivalry week. I can't do it. The tailgates, the rivalries, the energy in the stands, there's just nothing like it. But let's be real, actually getting tickets to these football games sometimes feel like it's more than a challenge than the game itself. Endless queues, prices jumping at checkout, endless fees. That's why I use the Game Time app. It's the app that gives the advantage back to the fans. It's the easiest way to score last-minute tickets with the best prices, no surprise fees. What you see is what you pay for. I pulled up the Game Time app, and in just a couple of taps, I saw amazing deals. I'm talking about your favorite college football games, college basketball games for as low as $25. The app made it super simple. I could even see the exact views from my seat before purchasing the order. Plus, I love those zone deals where I pick the section, Game Time picks the seats, and I save a whole lot of money. Honestly, it's faster, cheaper, less stressful than any other way that I bought tickets in the past. Take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets here in the end of the regular season with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, put in the redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go, and download the Game Time app today. Moving it up a day, instead of Throwback Thursday, we're going to do a way back when Wednesday. Hey, how about that? Neyland Press Corps, Noah Taylor joining us here today. 1951. That was a good year. It was a great year, right? Feels like 51. Tennessee, a unanimous national champion. Was that the first time in program history they were unanimous?
It was, yeah. They, 38, 39 were both undefeated regular seasons. 38 was actually undefeated all the way through. They beat Oklahoma in the Orange Bowl, but 51 and then 50 they had been selected national champs by some selectors, but 51 was the first time Tennessee had done it unanimously and obviously went undefeated in that regular season as well before losing to Maryland in the Sugar Bowl.
Yeah, and I'm going to ask about how they can be national champions yet lose to Maryland here in a moment, but we'll put that on the back burner. Almost didn't happen, right? I mean, came down to it. Vanderbilt was, 1-10, not a very good program. Did have an all-SEC quarterback nicknamed Bullet, which is kind of cool. But Vanderbilt, not a very good team. Shocker, I know. I know they are now, or at least this year. But Vanderbilt outplayed Spoiler. Vanderbilt gave Tennessee all that it wanted back in 1951 on that day, about 74 years ago. But Tennessee found some late game magic. Tennessee got into the end zone, pushed it ahead after they led by 3 scores early on, and there was a fight that ensued after the final touchdown. Tell us what happened. I mean, obviously, we think you were there. You might have been there. I mean, you act like you were there. Tell us what happened on that day at Shields-Watkins Field all those years ago.
Yeah, Tennessee, you'd mentioned it there. Vanderbilt really didn't seem like a threat. Tennessee had just pummeled everybody on their schedule. They won every game by at least 2 scores. You go back and you look at that schedule, the only team that gave them any kind of fight, if you're just box score watching, was Mississippi State in the season opener. Tennessee won the game 14-0. Most of their games were shutouts. There just wasn't a lot of close games. So by the end of the year, Tennessee is undefeated, number 1 in the major polls. Michigan State had a little bit of a case. Of course, they didn't play in December. This game was on December 1st. Michigan State season ended the week before, and they were undefeated as well, number 2 in the country. So they were probably hoping Tennessee would lose that game to kind of ensure they would get the national title bid. But Tennessee, all they had to do was beat Vanderbilt, and you're already number 1 in the polls, and that kind of was the insurance they needed to win the national championship. But you jump out to a 21-0 lead in the third quarter. You're feeling pretty good about where you're at, probably, and the articles I went back and read, there seemed to be a lot of confidence from Tennessee, and rightfully so, from the fans. There was a quote in there from Marvin West for the Knoxville News Sentinel that said fans just kind of sat back in their seat after Tennessee blocked a punt. Doug Atkins picked it up and scored to go up 21-0 in the third quarter. I read about Peggy Nealand, General Nealand's wife. She had a ritual where she did not cheer or allow anybody around her to cheer until Tennessee was up 3 scores. So after Doug Atkins picked up that ball and scored, somebody said, "Can we have some fun now?" She said, "Yeah, go ahead." So, Tennessee was kind of feeling like they were cruising to that national championship. They already locked up the Sugar Bowl bid. But things started to change there. You mentioned it, Bullet Bill Wade, the quarterback for Vanderbilt, just started throwing the ball and kind of living up to his nickname there. They move it downfield. They score to make it 21-7. Hank Loricella, phenomenal back, obviously, for Tennessee. And that was an incredible backfield. Herky Payne, we'll mention him in a minute, was back there as well. But he fumbles the ball. It's picked up by Vanderbilt. They score a couple plays later. Next thing you know, it's 21-14. And so things start getting a little bit tense. Vandy scores again, but misses the extra point. And so going in the fourth quarter, Tennessee's up 21-20. They're facing a 4th down from the Vanderbilt 16, and they need 5 yards. Vandy gets a stop there. Obviously, they've already got all the momentum, but Herky Payne picked it up, got 8 yards actually on 4th and 5. They faced 4th and 3 later on in that drive, and then he scores. So that was kind of a big deciding play for Tennessee to go up 28-20. Vanderbilt ended up scoring again to make it 28-26, but as you mentioned, Andy Kozar gets across the goal line. There's some reports that he tried to stretch the ball out a second time. A Vanderbilt player thought he was trying to punch him, so he punched back. Next thing you know, guys are wailing on each other. Benches cleared, police run out there on the field, try to break it up, and after settling that down after a few minutes, they kick the extra point and run the clock out on the kickoff. So, Tennessee's 1951 national championship, one of Neyland's greatest teams, but that Vanderbilt game certainly gave Tennessee a scare and very nearly cost them a national title.
Shook hands and patted each other on the back as to how they ended that game, or after that PAT, according to the newspaper reports. Of course, that's when all the fighting was going on. I mean, guys can be guys, right? I mean, what's so bad about throwing a couple of punches in a football game nowadays? I mean, now, like, if that happened, it's like, oh my gosh, that person's the worst person in the world. Back then, it was just commonplace.
Yeah, and what's funny, when I was putting the story together, I was trying to decide, because this is, like you mentioned, this is such a big Tennessee Vanderbilt game coming up Saturday. We don't get a lot of those where that couple days after Thanksgiving when these two teams meet, that there's a lot of national championship, or not really national championship, but college football playoff now implications, and certainly that's the case for Vanderbilt going into this game. So I was trying to look at, what are some games that were a big deal in the past? 51 obviously is huge, and there's a lot of parallels there because Tennessee was going for a national championship. They needed to get past Vanderbilt to get there, and they did, just barely. But 49, you talk about the fights. I almost did the 1949 game because Vanderbilt had 2 touchdowns called back in that game. The punt returner on a critical punt after Vanderbilt got a stop, leading 21-19, by the way, was bumped early. Tennessee picked up the ball, scored the game-deciding touchdown. And Bill Edwards, who was the head coach for Vanderbilt in this game in 51, it was his first year at Vandy in 49, he ended up having to get escorted off the field because he ran after an official, and police literally had to like tackle him and take him off the field. So I almost did that story, but like you had mentioned, nowadays we look at that and it's new. It dominates the headlines for like a week if a guy, throws a punch. But back then,
could you imagine a sitting head coach in today's game sprinting to try to get after an official, like punch him, tackle him? I mean, his world would be over. And back then it's like, Billy just got a little carried away. He'll be all right. Let's back next week.
It's unbelievable. And that's one thing I love about these stories is you certainly don't see that anymore. And like you said, that was that guy's first year, and he went after an official. And 3 years later, he's still coaching Vandy.
We're so soft nowadays, man. I mean, these were men, okay? These were men. Yeah. We're so soft nowadays. Tell me about why I just did the cardinal sin for a reporter/journal. You don't tell me. Please describe for us who are uneducated why they were national champions, but they lost the bowl game. Like, what was the timing like for awarding natties back in the day? Because it was a little off-putting earlier when you said, they won the nat, but then they lost the bowl game.
Yeah, essentially, you get back then it was all based on polls. It was based on wire service polls. The two obviously were the UPI and then the AP. Were kind of the two that picked your national champion. And then there were various selectors that could pick. That's why you have so many schools you see today that, it may run contradictory when you see them claim a national title, but you're like, hey, my team had a national championship from that year too. So it was just based on who the selectors picked. But the major polls were the big ones. And like we had mentioned, this was Tennessee's first unanimous national championship because they'd been so dominant that year. And as close as that Vanderbilt game was, it didn't undo how good Tennessee was overall that season. So they impressed the pollsters enough to get picked as the national champion that year. But essentially, bowl games were consolation prizes. You were only a handful back then. You had the bigger bowls, which was the Sugar Bowl, where the SEC champion usually went. You had the Cotton Bowl, the Rose Bowl. We look at these bowls now and see now you throw in the Peach Bowl is a big one as well now. But now we've got so many. We joked before we got on here about the Pop-Tart Bowl. You got so many chances now. You get 6 wins. There's some schools that can get in with 5 wins, based on academic standards or whatever, metrics they go by. But back then there were only a handful. And if you got invited, it was a big deal. If you got invited to a bowl game, it meant you had a really good year. So basically those were just consolation prizes for teams, and your national champion was picked when all the regular season games were over. And in Tennessee's case, this game was played on December 1st. December 4th, the final polls came in, and Tennessee was selected as the national champion that year for as dominant as they were. That Vanderbilt game, we talk about how big this one is. That one was huge. That one assured Tennessee. In some ways, it was the national championship game for Tennessee, and they pulled it out.
1951, Tennessee holds on to preserve an undefeated season, goes on to be unanimous national champions again back in 1951. And this would have been the 4th national championship, correct? Yeah, 4th. 5th one came in 98.
Yeah.
More on that over in Neyland Press Court. You can go check out his Substack, this being Noah Taylor. The link is in the show notes of this episode, and we do it every usually Thursday, but we're phrasing it a way back Wednesday here on today's show. Noah, it's always been great stuff. Looking forward to seeing what you have coming up next week. Again, we're kind of moving back into off-season content, but there's still plenty of stories to be told.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no shortage of Tennessee stories. So I already started working on this one because I've getting a little bit tired on Monday mornings after deciding to write on Sunday nights and staying up till midnight. So got a head start on this one this week, and I think it'll be a fun one to look back on when we hop on here next week.
I was going to say, you could change that, right? You could start on it earlier in the week, so you're not up till midnight on Sunday.
That's the beauty. Let me talk to my editor and see if that's all right, if I can write these a little bit sooner. I'll see what he says and get back to you.
Noah Taylor, every single Thursday, normally right here on Locked On Vols. Thanks as always, man.
Yeah, appreciate having me on, Eric.